in Islamic law from SOAS, but she first came to prominence when she had to fight to secure the right to wear the Islamic headscarf in school, along with her sister Fatima. So it's a pleasure to welcome her to the press today.
And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to the organisers of the event today. It's really been quite interesting. I'm going to tell a little bit more of a personal story. That's what I was asked to speak about today. Just for some of the audience, it might be too long back. Cast your minds back to 1989, when my sister and I, Aisha Alvi and myself, Aisha, unbeknownst to us, were to go through the most challenging experience of my life that has shaped the person who I have become today. I grew up in a very large family of 7 children in a very white English community in a Cheshire village where there were no other ethnic minorities in sight. Was that challenging? Yes, very challenging, hugely challenging. We were very far removed from the Muslim community in terms of where we lived. On the one hand, we had a very Christian exposure through our attendance of the local Church of England primary school, and some of our best memories. But on the other, my father was the founder and the chairman of the first purpose-built mosque in Manchester, the Victoria Park Mosque. So this was something to juggle with in terms of who I was as a person and identity. That's not to say that hijab is just all about identity. I know that's something that's often picked up. From an early age, I don't particularly recall any specific ambitions when I grew up. I was basically just a happy outdoor child, but there was always something that irked deep within me from where I grew up, that we were never really quite treated equally. We were the other. We were the brown kids in the neighbourhood in this very white middle-class English community. So I felt injustice early on. My subconscious told me it was the colour of my skin, but it was never something that we really talked about. It was something almost that we accepted. Then my life at the age of 14 years old was thrown into the public arena. The school that suspended us at the time is one of the best grammar schools in the country, Altrincham Grammar School for girls, for wanting to wear the Islamic headscarf. After 2 years of long negotiations with the headmistress at the time, we basically, my sister and I, went into the school without the permission of either of my parents and just basically said we weren't going to remove the headscarf. We had discussion after discussion with the school and it hadn't taken us anywhere. But what did we go armed with? We went armed with our faith in God, in Allah, and knowledge of our educational rights. So by God's grace, we were not only securing a basic right to practice our faith, but we were having to sort of justify and prove what Islam said. But thank God, alhamdulillah, this was an out-of-court battle, you could say, that was won really by the power of the media. Being the first case of its kind, the story hit the headlines and created phenomenal national media attention. The tabloids were interested in it. But at the time it could have so, for us, gone completely the other way. And it was also the responsibility that we carried in terms of setting a precedent. Because if the school were to say no, what precedent and the ripple effects that would set for other Muslim girls around the country. The general attitude at the time from the school was to find an alternative school. And it was basically the same old attitude that we're hearing today. If you don't like our way of life, then you should go back to your own country. This was what was being said. Everyone had an opinion, and we were at the centre of discussion up and down pubs across the country, radio programmes, etc. So at the time, Britain was being tested on all levels of tolerance, something very new at that time. So you could say the school was completely in the limelight for the wrong reasons. Surprisingly though, we actually gained unexpected support from the Commission for Racial Equality, the National Union of Teachers. Even the Jewish Gazette wrote a very complimentary article about us. The Manchester Council of Mosques, the list was endless in terms of the support. But on the other side, there was piles and piles of hate mail that used to come through the door. So let's move on to 20 years on, at the time I would say anti-Islam. I've had to change my opinion about it. We tried to put it down to just pure ignorance. People didn't know much about Islam, people back to haunt us. So what we're witnessing in this country, like many in Europe, is an unashamed national reaction to the new visibility of Muslims. Our memories are short, but we need to be reminded of the genocide of the Muslims in Bosnia in 1992, long before 9/11 and long before 7/7. They did not practice Islam assiduously. They intermarried, and they were certainly not visibly Muslim. Nevertheless, this did not prevent a mass victimization of Muslims through an ethnic cleansing. 2 years ago, let's not forget Marwa al-Sharbini, who died the headscarf martyr. Marwa was a 31-year-old veiled Egyptian pharmacist who was brutally stabbed 18 times in a German courtroom as her young 3-year-old son watched. Her attacker was a German man who was being prosecuted for calling her a terrorist. In one incident, he had actually tried to take off her headscarf. Many in her homeland in Germany were outraged. Many in her homeland were outraged by the attack and saw the low-key response in Germany as an example of the racism and the anti-Muslim sentiment. Some of them chanting, "There is no God but God, and the Germans are the enemies of God." But because Marwa's death happened just days after Nicolas Sarkozy gave a major policy speech denouncing the wearing of the burqa and the resurgence of the far-right groups, in the latest European many Muslims believe the death of Sharbini is part of a broader trend of European intolerance towards Islam and Muslims. So let's pray that Marwa is the first and the last Muslimah to ever die for being veiled and killed of the Muslims in Europe, and this does not become a forthcoming trend. We can ask ourselves the question, 20 years on, does the law afford us any protection on varying forms of Islamic dress? And I think my answer to that clearly is no, it doesn't afford us any protection. And we know that from the various cases that have gone to the European Court of Human Rights. The European Convention on Human Rights, Article 9, states that everyone has the right to the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. But actually, it affords us no protection. For example, the key case is Sahin versus Turkey, and we know what happened in that case, where a Turkish law was challenged, where a Turkish girl was banned for wearing the Islamic headscarf. She took it all the way up to the ECHR, and she lost her case. And the decision-making process is extremely subjective. So the same battles rage on. We're in a climate where prejudice towards Islam and Muslims has intensified beyond comprehension. The right to wear hijab in schools has brought back the same arguments to the drawing board which we were faced with 20 years ago. The same old, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, which was something that we were told by our headmistress. Globalization has changed multicultural Britain overnight. New citizens, new colours, new skins, new traditions, new religions, and open ostentation symbols means English society, I think, have dug their heels in and regurgitating the same old, our way of life and our values are being threatened. So where are we all supposed to go? We can't be deported back to our motherlands. We were born, we were brought up here, we've been educated here. And I basically feel that what we're being told as Muslim women is that we're being told the best Muslim is the one that we cannot visibly see. Keep it private, keep it at home. I was going to go a little bit into the history of the veil, but I think due to the shortage of time, I'm not really going to be able to cover that. But just to sort of finish off, I'd just like to say that my vision basically for the next 10 years is that we need to enlighten people so they know that the hijab, the jilbab, the niqab are all part of our religious freedom. So if you don't want religious freedom in this country, ban the religion completely, but don't ban specific parts of the religion that don't fit in with British sensibilities. Islam is totalitarian, and let us not be apologetic for that. It is one and whole and should not be defragmented. We shouldn't, forcing hijab, whilst I disagree with forcing hijab on, forcing hijab off is also equally as bad. So real practical progression over the next decade will only be when Muslims are truly accepted in British society and Muslims genuinely feel free to practice their faith. My vision is a Britain that allows Muslims and and order the faiths to practice their faiths openly and freely, without the fear of England's green and pleasant land being taken over by people who are not white enough, not atheist enough, not secular enough, and not Christian enough. Isn't it ironic, the very freedom that Britain wants to unleash, for example, on Afghani women, the so-called freedom to uncover, is the exact reversal of what is taking place in France and in the UK. We need to envision a community of hijab-clad women in Parliament, news presenters, hijab-clad women in soaps, so it's no longer an alien concept. We need to be represented in British society. We need to be visibly practicing Muslim women who can lead and be role models in the next 10 years ahead. To those Muslim sisters out there, don't be afraid of being recognised as a Muslim and hold your heads up high.